Once theorists begin to converge on a set of well-specified phenomena, which together constitute the domain of the mental, we also see them begin to converge on two general approaches, two different classes of ontological frameworks with which to proceed forward. On the one hand, we have oppositional substance dualism. On the other hand, we have monistic physicalism or materialism. So we see now, with Cartesian dualism, there is a transition to what we might call normal philosophy. Normal philosophy can be characterized by attempting to address a set of relatively well-defined problems, employing a relatively well-defined set of methodologies. In this period, the well-defined problems turn out to be how best to formulate an ontological framework in order to characterize both the phenomenon within each of the domains, the mental and the physical, as well as to characterize the interactions between those domains. The methodology standardly deployed to address and resolve these problems consists in formulating a priori or a posteriori arguments intended to undermine one type of ontological framework and or elevate the other type of ontological framework. This back and forth of argumentation reinforces and exposes the fundamental difficulties faced by each view. In the case of oppositional substance dualism, the fundamental difficulty consists in explaining the interaction between the phenomenon in the two domains using the ontological frameworks of mental substance and physical substance. In the case of monistic physicalism, the problem that emerges is how to characterize these seemingly sui generis, quite different phenomenon of the mental domain using exclusively the categories and resources of the monistic physicalistic ontological framework. With all that in mind, we can pivot and begin discussing the mind-body problem using the sort of ahistorical conventional presentations that you would find in a typical philosophy of mind course. A common strategy for introducing students to the philosophy of mind focuses on this particular topic. The instructor picks a famous person, say like Einstein here, and asks students the following questions. What sort of properties do you think of when you think of Albert Einstein? And students might well say something like this. Oh, brilliant. He was also short. Passionate. Also hairy. Committed pacifist. Kind of dumpy. Not a particularly fashionable dresser. Now, when we look at the left side versus the right side of these comments, what we see are quite different kinds of properties. Short, hairy, dumpy, those are all physical properties that are easily and unremarkably had by mammalian bodies. Committed pacifist, passionate, brilliant, these are all mental properties that aren't normally had just by any old physical object, but instead are restricted, generally speaking, to higher order life forms. The central problem, then, for the philosophy of mind within that kind of framework is that some properties that any physical object can have. Every human being has a mass. Many of us have too much mass, in fact. Other properties strike us as being uniquely mental and limited to a relatively select group of physical objects. And this latter set of properties seem to be had only by things with minds. That is, minds seem like a class of entities that are fundamentally different from physical objects. Of course, one then wants to ask all sorts of questions. Well, if this is the case, then how do mental things differ from physical things? Are we physical things? And if we are physical things, why can't some physical things have our mental properties? What is it that distinguishes us from a bicycle rack or a mailbox? Why is it that it seems unproblematic to talk about an angst-ridden teenager, but it seems bizarre to talk about an angst-ridden bicycle?